Welcome to Developer Stories on the Road to MSIX, a podcast for developers that are interested in updating their installers to MSIX. I'm Tim Mangan. In Chapter 5, we looked at the file type association, shell integration, verb commands in traditional applications. And we introduced how to determine if you could use the simple solution in MSIX or if a more complicated solution would be needed. In this chapter, I'll show you how to create the MSIX package for the simple case using Visual Studio. But first, a quick review. Traditional applications register file type association, integration, verb commands in the registry, sort of like this. But in MSIX packages, we no longer define registry entries, but instead we put the information into the AppX manifest file of the package. As we explained, how you do that depends on the complexity of your file type commands and applications. You can review Chapter 5 in more detail for what makes the simple or complex set, but this video is about the simple case. So here is how we handle that. Here in Visual Studio 2026, I have my original WPF.NET Framework simple application here. It's called Test WPF App 1. There's a second project in my solution file that we'll use in the next chapter, but we're just going to be ignoring that in this video. For this demo, the application just parses and shows any command line arguments it receives in the main window. Now, a real application would be parsing the arguments and taking the appropriate action. This is just so that we can see what's going on. You can see in the XAML, I have a text block where it'll show the received arguments in this dialog. So, for example, if I just run the native application with no arguments, it tells me that there were no arguments. Before I make any changes, I'll make a new branch in GitHub. Let's call the branch testwfta demo 1. We can now add a Windows Application Project, or WAP for short, to our solution. This is the project that will actually generate the MSIX package. If we look at the WAP project dependencies, we can already see that it includes a reference to the Windows SDK Build Tools project as a dependency. Now, to add our application project to the WAP, we right-click on the references and add the project. This will add the output files of the EXE project into our WAP project, as well as recognize that since the reference project was .NET Framework based, it will adjust the app manifest template accordingly. Now, the file that you see here, named package.appxmanifest, is a template file that you'll be editing. The resulting MSIX package will contain an appxmanifest.xml file, which will be generated from this. Anything that we need in that appxmanifest file needs to be put in here. I'll start by replacing the package identity. That's the name field here. And in the publisher field, I'll put the subject field for my code signing certificate. I'll just leave the version field as it is. Now, because the project we included was .NET Framework based, the first thing I want to check is that we have a full trust MSIX package. Here in the package dependencies element are entries that support both UWP and desktop dependency declarations. The WAP added the package framework dependency for both UWP and traditional programs because it didn't know what we were going to actually have in our package. We can remove the universal item, although leaving it here wouldn't really cause any harm. Here in the application element, I'll check that the entry point element says windows.fulltrustapplication. Now, what we have in here right now are variables, and these would work, but I just really feel more comfortable making sure that it says Windows.FullTrustApplication there. It makes it very clear to anyone who has to look at the contents of your package later on. Now, if I look down here, I'll see the declared capabilities. MSIX packages must have that Run Full Trust capability declared from the ResCap namespace. I see it's already there, and that's good. By the way, don't confuse Run Full Trust with things like Elevation for Run as Admin. Think of it as configuring the container to allow everything that is allowed to run in the container. Without it, the app runs in the container configured for UWP, which puts in some pretty strong restrictions about what can be done by the app. If the app was not written as a UWP app or in a newer .NET runtime, you really need Run Full Trust. That's true for both .NET Framework packages and the older Win32 software. Now, since I'm here in the capabilities, I'm going to remove this Internet Client capability that was automatically added. This was added in case I want to use the internal app installer method of updates. But since I'm not, and I know this application does not access the internet, this can be removed. Now, it wouldn't cause any harm. I just don't like to declare capabilities that I won't be using. Okay, so we're ready to add the file type association and the two command verbs that we'll need, open and play. I already know that we'll be using elements from the UAP, UAP2, and UAP3 namespaces to do this. Now, whenever you're adding new elements that require schema namespace reference to your manifest, you need to be sure that the reference has been defined at the root element of the XML, package. You can see a number of these are already in place. The UAP namespace is already here, but I'll need both UAP2 and UAP3. Now, it's pretty easy to do this. I'm just going to copy the existing UAP line and add 2 additional copies. And then I'm going to change the name here and then fix up the references at the end. For good practice, I'll also add the new namespaces to the ignorable namespaces. Now, the order doesn't matter in any of this stuff, but I usually keep them in alphabetical order anyway. To bring the file type association into the AppX manifest, I'm going to need to add an application element associated with the target application of the FTA. In the AppX manifest schemas, some extensions go under the application elements and others go under the package level extensions. File type associations must be present under an application element. So we first locate our application element and see that there are no extensions present already, so we'll add in the extensions element. This is a container that would hold a whole bunch of extensions potentially. Now, Microsoft has created several different ways to do extensions for the file type associations. If you search the schema sets, you'll find that there are a UAP, there's a UAP2 stuff, there's UAP3, there's even UAP5 schema extensions associated with file type associations. Now, because we have 2 shell command verbs to integrate into the same file type, we need at least UAP2, but I usually prefer to use UAP3. It has some added capabilities that we might need. We're not going to need UAP5. Each new schema extension tends to extend the previous extension rather than be a complete replacement for the old. So you'll find that in our solution, we're going to be doing a combination of different things from UAP, UAP2, and UAP3. This is pretty common in the manifest, and you really have to depend on the documentation and Microsoft Learn to get the exact setups that you need. We'll need to start setting it up as a UAP3 type of an extension. Now, all extensions have a category, and the schema definitions will restrict what categories can be used on which elements in a particular schema. Note that the category string itself is very case specific, and it's always by definition using a Pascal case, starting with lowercase letters. We'll now add the file type association element, again using the UAP3 namespace. The name parameter is only used as a display identifier for things like when the user wants to select which app or packaged app should be the default of a file type. The supported file types element goes as a child of the file type association element, and this is defined in the UAP namespace only. Under here, we'll put the different file types that we are defining for this particular extension. Now, the file type itself element, that could be UAP or UAP3, but it doesn't really matter. Do pay attention to the leading dot in front of the character in the value. Now, I'll also mention that you can't add the asterisk or wildcard file type to get a right click on any file type. That's just not allowed in MSIX. But for specific types of files, we can define them this way. So we'll put in the two file types that we need here. And of course, you could have added more if that's what you needed. The other child of the file type association element will be the supported verbs, and that's going to come from the UAP2 namespace. Now, the verbs themselves are going to be in the UAP3 namespace. The UAP3 version of the verb added the capability to describe command line parameters, and that's what we really need here. So that at the end user will see the text of open and play, the value of these verb elements, and it'll be in the form that you see right there. The ID field is really there for management purposes. Now, when this package is installed, if the user right-clicks on a file or one of the supported file types and selects Open, the command that's defined as the executable parameter of the application element that all of this is under is going to be run with arguments of what's in the parameters block here. Now, the %1 will be replaced by the full path of the file the user clicked on. So it ends up working the same way the old registry method worked. It's just we're putting it here in the Apex manifest file. All right, so now let's build and publish our MSIX package. Oh, right, I want to get the MSIX package into the batch build list first. So the build step is just processing the template and gathering the files into an ingredient list. It's not creating the MSIX package. To do that, we need to use the publish command. Since we haven't done that publishing yet for this package, we'll need to configure a few things this first time. Now, I want sideloading, as I have no intent to distribute this through the Microsoft Store, and I don't need the update, so I'll uncheck that. I have my code signing certificate ready, so I'll need to select that. Well, this one's my private cert, but I'll use my public one today. And then I'm going to want to add in timestamping so that the package will still be valid when the cert expires in a couple of years. I'll use http://timestamp.acs.microsoft.com. That's a good timestamp server. I don't need the bundle because I'm building for only one architecture, any CPU, which covers both the x86 and x64 systems I might test this on. Now, I could add an ARM64 build, but I'm not doing that today. Then I would want to have the bundle. I was prompted for my password off screen for the signing, so you didn't see that, but we now have a package. So let's find it here. I'll just double-click to install it. The desktop app installer starts the application much like you would from the Start menu, so it's not using the file association. And so there's no command line arguments, as you can see in the output. Here I have a folder with some test files that have different file extensions. .fict1 and 2 are recognized as associated with our package, as is evident by the default icon being present, whereas .fict3 is not. I'll click on the fict1 file. You can see the open menu in the list, and that's because it's the default verb. As you can see, the app received the /open parameter with the path to the file that I'd right-clicked on. Now, if I hold the Shift key when I right-click, I do get to see all the verbs. This is the same as the right-click and then selecting the Show More Options entry. So here's the play verb, and it works properly. If we look at .fict2, it's also set up properly. And of course, .fict3 doesn't have an app associated with it. So this is how we migrate file type associations into the MSIX AppX manifest file for most of the simple setups of file type associations. Join me in the next chapter, where we take a look at more complicated setups and how we must use parts of the package support framework to handle those. This concludes this chapter of The Road to MSIX. If you missed earlier chapters, you can get them from the Tmergent LinkedIn page or our YouTube channel. Keep an eye out for new chapters too. You can see some of the ones that we're planning here. But I'd also love to do a podcast with you about your experiences in creating MSIX packages. Just contact me on LinkedIn. I'm Tim Mangan on The Road to MSIX. Thanks for listening.